Anybody on our side hiding any shocking and fantastic abilities they'd like to disclose, I'm open to suggestions.
Wow, I bet Tony'd be really ticked off if he found out some of his teammates were hiding a few tricks up their sleeves.
Sorry.
The MCU Avengers are some of the greatest examples of how to translate characters from the page to the screen. They are unbelievably powerful, wielding some of the universe's strongest weapons and defeating some of the toughest villains the wide multiverse has to offer. We've seen the best moves from our favorite heroes. Or have we? No, in fact, even with all the power we've seen, our favorite MCU Avengers are hiding some powers from the comics. Let's take a look at the powers and abilities that the Avengers have but have never used in the MCU right now.
I guess that's the signal.
Way to go, Tic Tac! If there's one MCU character who no longer has anything to prove in terms of how powerful she is, it's the Scarlet Witch, even though she may now officially be gone. Wanda showed nearly unbelievable power in the MCU, including taking on Thanos all on her own and creating an entire fictional world within a hex, where she had a family and took the entire town hostage. Not to mention her entire run with the Darkhold, that allowed her to dreamwalk into other universes and hunt down America Chavez. Needless to say, Wanda has nothing left to prove in terms of how powerful she is. But believe it or not, there is one we haven't seen, and surprisingly, it's one of her most consistently used in the comics. This power is known as her Hex Spheres. Essentially, she can create discs with her magic that alter the probability fields of everything they touch. They are often used to change the tide of certain battles or cause bad luck for those she fights against. We've seen Wanda create red spheres, but they're often just used as concussive weapons. She's created illusions and definitely altered reality, but never with these tricky little circles. That could be a small but significant game changer in any fight. Overall, it feels like she just skipped over this one and went straight to her very popular brainwash a town into believing they're in a series of sitcoms so I can have children and bring my dead robot husband back to life trick. That one's always a crowd pleaser. Both versions of Ant-Man have amazing power thanks to the brilliant mind of the original Ant-Man, Hank Pym. Hank Pym's resizing technology has allowed himself, his wife, their daughter, and a low-level burglar whom he befriended to become some of the most powerful Avengers, Ant-Man and the Wasp, with multiple people holding both titles. Ant-Man can shrink down incredibly small and fight crime, retaining the mass of a fully grown man. He can control ants and has learned how to grow himself to incredible sizes. All of these powers are pulled straight from the pages of the comic books, and Hank Pym even changes his name at one point to Giant Man to reference the fact that he can get big now, not just small. However, with all of these incredible powers, none are perhaps more impressive than his ability to travel to the quantum realm. In so doing this, he has made incredible scientific breakthroughs such as healing particles and the ability to time travel. The quantum realm is based heavily on the microverse from the comics, a realm home to such creatures as Kang the Conqueror and other terrifying beings. However, one thing that is not transferred from page to the screen, or at least not yet, is his ability to do the complete opposite. To get to the quantum realm, Ant-Man has to shrink so incredibly small, but he can access another realm if he grows to an enormous size. This is a realm that contains such powerful beings as the Living Tribunal in the comics, and Ant-Man is able to access it by growing continuously. We have seen in the MCU what happens when Hank Pym pushes the limits of his shrinking tech, but should Scott Lang never hit the stop button when becoming Giant Man, we could see him enter a new place altogether. Thor, the God of Thunder, may soon prove himself to be the undisputed most powerful member of the Avengers. I'm sure there's other people vying for the title as well, but he's definitely close. The way Thor first appeared in his first solo film was dead-on accurate from how he appears most of the time in the comics. Several of Thor's abilities, his strength level, and heck even the weird winged helmet are straight from the pages. Thor's power set and ability to manipulate lightning helps make him one of the best people to have on your hero team. What's more, Thor wielded some of the most impressive weapons. Stormbreaker may be a little bit different from the Stormbreaker we know belonging to Beta Ray Bill in the comic books, but his first weapon, Mjolnir, was a straight copy and paste. Mjolnir can be summoned by Thor from anywhere in the universe and it will return to his hand.
Sorry.
It is enchanted and cannot be lifted by anyone who is not worthy of wielding the mighty powers of the God of Thunder.
You're all not worthy.
However, Mjolnir in the comics wields even more impressive power that we just have not seen in the MCU, though with the hammer restored there is still some possibilities. At one point in the comics, Mjolnir has the ability of creating portals that could instantly transport Thor to anywhere in the universe. The Bifrost is a nice shortcut, but it's still a long road you have to take versus something like a sling ring or even the Space Stone, which can transport you there instantly. Thor had to give up these powers of Mjolnir when he was fighting Lord Immortus, a variant of Kang the Conqueror, but for a brief time, Mjolnir had the same level of power as an Infinity Stone. Mjolnir now is pretty cool though, breaking off into several pieces and whatnot. Let's leave the portals to Doctor Strange, I guess. The Incredible Hulk is a being completely grounded in science. Scientist Bruce Banner irradiated his own blood with gamma radiation, which allows him to transform sometimes at will and sometimes not into the Incredible Hulk. However, in the comics, the Hulk has some abilities that reach beyond the purview of known science. The world of mythical monsters is being revealed a little at a time in the MCU. We already have giant wolves and fire demons. Vampires are on the way, so I don't think it would surprise literally anyone to find out that ghosts exist in the MCU. However, we probably haven't seen them yet because of most characters' inability to know that they are there. In the comics, that is certainly not a problem for the most unlikely candidate to peer into the netherworld, the Incredible Hulk. Hulk has been shown on numerous occasions to be able to see ghosts and even communicate with Doctor Strange in his astral form. There is no clear reason given as to why he's able to accomplish this. It certainly wasn't done on purpose or unintentionally caused by some gamma radiation mishap. Many people think that the multiple personalities of the Hulk allow him to access this spiritual plane. Or perhaps he was just chosen by some higher power to be able to communicate with the dead from time to time. We definitely have not seen the Hulk be able to do this in the MCU, but I'm sure he would like to. He could reminisce with Tony or even Natasha. He could also team up with Doctor Strange a whole lot more, but regardless, I think the Hulk wields enough power without adding the undead to the equation. Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, is the symbol of freedom not only in the comics but in glorious fashion on the big screen in the MCU. This character is truthfully one of the most faithful adaptations. He possesses all of the same strength, speed, endurance, and leadership capabilities as his comic book counterpart. However, there is one glaring gap in his skill set. The joke of Steve Rogers in the MCU is his man-out-of-time status, and how he may be lacking in certain things people of the present would consider common knowledge. Like most stubborn old men, the technology of this day and age likely has him thrown for a loop. He doesn't know what Star Wars is or how to fix anything on a helicarrier, though he could tell you it runs on electricity.
I'll put it on the list.
No, it's true that Steve in the MCU is a great many things, but tech savvy is not one of them. That, however, is not always the case in the comics. On the pages, from the imaginations of great writers and artists, Steve is actually a skilled hacker and has been able to get his way into enemy servers and databases for pertinent information pertaining to his missions. Wild, right? In the MCU, he definitely never accomplished this. He may have traveled in time, but I will tell you he definitely wasn't the brains behind it. It's not that Cap is dumb, in fact he's brilliant. He's maybe the best strategist in the MCU, but the technology of today is not something I think he ever cared to try and pick up. But who can blame him? Those touchscreens are so finicky. The Black Panther T'Challa has a long and extensive comic history, and in just one solo and 3 team-up films, he has left a lasting impact that will never be forgotten. We have seen T'Challa in the MCU take on several imposing villains and use amazing powers to do so. His speed, agility, and superhuman senses, given to him by the heart-shaped herb, mirror his comic counterpart to a T. He's one of the most comic-accurate characters in the MCU. However, given that his time in the films was a lot shorter than his time in the comics, it's safe to say that we didn't get to everything the Black Panther is capable of. During a time when T'Challa was helping protect Hell's Kitchen, Shuri took over as the Black Panther in Wakanda. Upon his return, an attack from an undead city below Wakanda called Necropolis was in progress. Instead of returning to Wakanda as the Black Panther, Bast herself chose T'Challa to be the ruler of Necropolis to control the undead wreaking havoc. T'Challa became Bast's Black Panther, better known as the King of the Dead. This granted him with all the powers of the past Black Panthers that he now had unlimited access to, making him all-powerful. We've seen the Black Panther access the ancestral plane in the MCU, but it's very brief and offers a momentary reconnection with a lost loved one. For the next Black Panther to have full access to the spirits of that plane would unleash a power never seen before. Are we surprised that Natasha Romanoff's secrets have secrets? Raised in the Red Room to be a master assassin, Black Widow was one of the only members of the original Avengers without superhuman enhancements. Or just was she? Natasha is a professional spy and killer, loaning her talents to world organizations like S.H.I.E.L.D. and the KGB. She is an acrobat, a dancer, and an excellent interrogation specialist.
So, Banner, that's your play.
However, the reason as to why she ranks up so highly above others to deserve a spot on the Avengers has never really been touched on. It may or may not be true, and until we have confirmation, I have to assume it's not. But in the comics, part of the Black Widow program run by the Red Room was to infuse the subjects with an augmented version of the super soldier serum. This means that beyond all of the extensive training, the Black Widows are backed by a version of the formula responsible for characters like Captain America, John Walker, Bucky, Emil Blonsky, and so much more. In the MCU, it's possible that this is the case. I mean, it certainly would explain all the multiple story falls and car crashes that both Natasha and Yelena repeatedly survive. But in the comics, the serum not only provides durability, but superhuman levels of strength and speed as well. This is definitely the most borderline one. Like, it's possible, there are definite hints, but some of the powers provided by the Black Widow Super Soldier Serum just have not been displayed. Doctor Strange is a master of the mystic arts, and has quickly mastered an untold number of abilities both seen in comics and created fresh for the MCU. He can conjure portals, fire energy blasts, use telekinesis, and even found a way to access alternate dimensions. However, one overpowered ability that Doctor Strange has, but we have never actually seen him use, is telepathy. That's right, he's no Professor X, but Doctor Strange does have the ability to read minds, and in some cases control them. This power would have been extremely useful in certain scenarios, especially in the recent past, but nonetheless, he never brought this one out. There are a few possible reasons, the first being that this power was simply forgotten when moving from the page to the screen. But Doctor Strange learns too quickly for me to believe that. Second would be because Doctor Strange simply doesn't need it.
No. Oh, well, maybe, I don't know.
There have been times where Strange has shown such incredible intuition that mind reading wouldn't be much more helpful. He was able to figure out that Wanda was the one hunting America Chavez just by listening closely. Finally, it could be a moral issue. The ability to read and control minds is an extremely dangerous and pervasive power that, if left in the wrong hands, could be used for horrifying purposes. Doctor Strange may have figured telepathy out, but vowed never to use it, knowing the possible corruption that the power could have on the user. It's a good thing he chose to use an evil book to grow a third eye instead of mind reading. Good move, Doc. There was perhaps no bigger surprise in the MCU that one of the most powerful heroes was actually Peter Jason Quill, aka Star-Lord. This journey took a little bit of a diversion from his comic counterpart, who was half alien instead of half celestial. There have also been times where Peter becomes the literal Star-Lord, gaining cosmic powers from being thrown into the sun. He's been one of the strongest heroes ever to exist, and we barely got a glimpse at his cosmic potential when he was revealed to be the son of Ego the Living Planet.
My name is Ego. And I'm your dad, Peter.
However, we're not here to talk about any of that. What I want to talk about is the Scavenger Star-Lord, armed with nothing but two trusty blasters and his quick but sometimes dim wit. The weapons Star-Lord uses are slightly different in the comics, and I would have liked to see the MCU's take on them. Star-Lord used to use what are known as element guns, meaning they had the ability of firing any of the four elements at his opponents. They could be flamethrowers, slingshots with rocks, fire ice shards, and so much more. But in the MCU, all we got are some boring space blasters. I want an Avatar-style Star-Lord, and I want him now. So whichever weapon maker is still kicking around in the MCU, get to work on Star-Lord's element guns straight away. One thing that Quicksilver was really good at in the comics that he fell short on in the MCU is, not getting hit by bullets. Too soon? One of the fastest characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, though possibly recently dethroned by Makari, played a small but crucial role in Avengers Age of Ultron. He proved to have amazing power, provided to him by the Hydra tests with the Mind Stone. Though if I'm a betting man, I would put a whole lot of money on some retconning in the near future, likely relating his abilities to some sort of mutation. His super speed allows him to see the world in slow motion, and he uses this to punch Captain America straight in the face, and destroy dozens of Ultron bots in a single second. This entire power set is pretty consistent with Quicksilver from the comics, and he likely has a large assortment of unseen powers as well, such as a certain level of enhanced strength and also an incredibly quick metabolism. However, one thing we did not see Quicksilver do, and I don't know that he could have in the MCU, was use his super speed to develop a sort of quick intelligence.
You didn't see that coming?
In the comics, Quicksilver can move so fast that the rest of the world remains still. In this time, Quicksilver can do normal tasks in a single second. He has been able to read extensive books and even learn how to play musical instruments in the same amount of time it takes someone to blink. The Fox version of Quicksilver was definitely close to this level of speed, only instead of using his seemingly endless time to read and learn, he tended to steal things and play video games. Had Quicksilver survived in the MCU, it's likely his power would have increased significantly, just like his sisters did. To the point where bullets just stand still in the air. Okay, that one was definitely too soon. The best heroes always keep a trick or two up their sleeves, whether those sleeves be made of metal, leather, or even if they don't have sleeves at all. Which hidden ability do you think we will most likely see a character use in the MCU?
Supervillains in the MCU have come and gone, but what if I told you we didn't get to see all of their powers on screen? Some of these villains have abilities in the comics that aren't showcased in the MCU. Here are powers of supervillains that are never or rarely used in Marvel projects. We're going to hit the ground running and talk about Thanos. The Mad Titan has incredible strength, durability, and healing powers. When you give him the Infinity Gauntlet, he is one mean purple machine. But Thanos does contain powers that aren't shown in the MCU. For instance, the Titan can fly. In Marvel Comics, Thanos went up in a fight against Star-Lord and started to fly without his Space Throne and the Infinity Gauntlet. I imagine that this would make him incredibly hard to beat in the MCU, but I mean, come on! Not only that, but Thanos also uses magic in the comics. I know. What can he do? He has knowledge of ancient mystic lore and can even manipulate matter and energy. He once turned a scroll into stone and cursed Deadpool with immortality so he couldn't be with death. Needless to say, there was a lot more to Thanos in the MCU during the Infinity Saga, but clearly Marvel Studios didn't want to make him too OP. Taskmaster appeared in Black Widow, and it seems that many fans weren't pleased with the villain's role in the movie, let alone how her story arc ended. But the villain is supposedly going to be in the Thunderbolts, so who knows what to expect. Regardless, besides being able to master every opponent's moves in the film, Taskmaster was kind of a letdown. One power that wasn't used in the movie was Taskmaster's ability to mimic voices.
I know that voice.
And now it's all mine.
Taskmaster can change her vocal cords in order to sound like someone completely different. It would have been awesome to hear her voice someone close to Black Widow to catch her off guard and then pop out of nowhere with all of her moves. There was just something missing from this character in the film. So hopefully, if she does return in the Thunderbolts, we will be able to see more from her. Ronan the Accuser was quite the villain in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, until he lost to a dance-off. That is pretty embarrassing if you ask me. Before taking this L, Ronan had a lot of strength once he acquired the Power Stone towards the end of the film. He morphed it into his weapon, which made it even more powerful than it already was. In the comics, this weapon is called the Universal Weapon and holds a lot of power and energy. It has the ability to manipulate gravity as well as fire energy blasts. Keep in mind, this is without the Infinity Stone attached to it. I understand that the MCU needed to keep introducing these Infinity Stones in projects, but I think it would have been way cooler to see Ronan use his hammer as it was. Imagine him just staring you down in a dance battle and he just blasts you away with his heavy-looking hammer. That would catch me off guard compared to knowing that he put the Power Stone in his hammer, but that's just my opinion. I know Loki is at the center of the multiverse saga and he's taking a turn in his evil ways, but he was a supervillain at one point and a really good one at that. During the Infinity Saga, we saw Loki alter his appearance, cast multiple projections of himself, and use his suave words in order to move forward in his evil plans.
Your savior is here!
His magic and mischievous ways always made him quite the character on the big screen, but one particular ability we never saw him use was becoming a frost giant. Sure, he was already struggling with his identity as it was before he found out he was a frost giant,
Because I'm the monster that parents tell their children about at night.
but why not use that to your advantage in battles? Cryokinesis could freeze or slow down your enemies, and you could use your superhuman density to enhance your strength and durability. This would have come in handy when battling Thanos at the beginning of Infinity War. Well, maybe. But it would be nice to see Loki use his frost giant powers combined with his mischievous magic. Perhaps we will see some of that in Loki Season 2. Come on guys, I'm just trying to be hopeful. Ultron is the definition of a great supervillain, and you cannot tell me differently. A little side note, apparently Ultron may appear in Armor Wars? What do we think about that? If he does, maybe we can see him use a power that we didn't see in Avengers Age of Ultron, which is hypnosis. In the comics, Ultron was actually created by Hank Pym. It took him a while to remember that he did because Ultron hypnotized Hank Pym once he became self-aware of what he was. Ultron also used mind control on Jarvis to make the Avengers believe that Jarvis was the villain instead of him. It stinks that we didn't get to see this back in the second Avengers film, but I am crossing my fingers for his appearance in Armor Wars so that we can see these powers. Agatha, oh Agatha, where art thou, Agatha? As the first major villain we spent time with in the Multiverse Saga, Agatha Harkness did not disappoint. She played the long game in order to try and steal Wanda's chaos magic while the town of Westview was going through all this mind-controlled turmoil. Agatha almost succeeded in her mission until Wanda ultimately outsmarted her and stole the Darkhold. While Agatha does have unique magic abilities, one power she never used was her experience manipulation. Now this is different from the illusions she made in WandaVision, where her experience manipulation allows her to make herself and others experience events in a matter of seconds. In the comics, she actually cast a spell on Captain America so he could experience 500 years of events from the past in an instant. I don't know if I would ever want to mess with her now, knowing that she can do that.
And I killed Sparky too.
With her own show coming out, Agatha Coven of Chaos, perhaps we will be able to witness more of her hidden powers. Red Skull is one of Captain America's biggest villains in the comics, and it's a downer that we only got to see him in his truest form in Captain America, the First Avenger. Sure, we saw him guarding the Soul Stone on Vormir during Infinity War and Endgame, but besides being a creepy know-it-all, he didn't do much in those two films. One power that we never got to see him use in the first Captain America movie was his ability to clone different versions of himself. Whenever Red Skull felt in danger, he would transfer his consciousness to a clone of his, or send his clones to do his evil bidding. That's one of the major reasons why he was able to survive for so long in the comics, but it seems that his story in the MCU has been cut short and won't be seen for quite some time, if at all. I personally would have loved to see more of Red Skull in the MCU as a bigger villain to Captain America and his friends, especially with his ability to have clones of himself. Darren Cross, aka Yellow Jacket, is quite the villain in the MCU. A greedy, brilliant man who just wants to have power in the world, but ends up becoming MODOK in the quantum realm. He's had an interesting story arc across 2 Ant-Man movies, and it's sad to say that this fellow Avenger won't be around anymore. But it is the multiverse saga, so anything can happen. During his time as Yellow Jacket in the comics, Darren Cross was able to utilize the powers of Ant-Man by having a nuclear-organic pacemaker to make him one with his suit. This gave him the opportunity to shrink and use his Ant-Man-like powers without actually wearing the suit. I think this would have made the villain in the MCU way more intimidating and powerful as compared to the naive and mean guy he was portrayed as. Will Darren make a return for the 3rd time in the MCU? Doubtful, but if he does, I hope his Yellow Jacket suit has an upgrade to how it is in the comics. Some of you may disagree with this person being on the list, but she was a villain in Multiverse of Madness and you cannot tell me differently. Scarlet Witch is one of the most iconic characters in the MCU, especially after kicking off the multiverse saga by starring in WandaVision. She's clearly going through things that put her down a dark path, which led to certain events in Phase 4, but that doesn't mean she wasn't evil during that time. One of my favorite powers of the Scarlet Witch is her nightmare-inducing ability. Now, we did witness this ability in Avengers Age of Ultron when she appeared in the MCU, but we have not seen this power since then. Sure, she's used other cool abilities, but I would be using this non-stop in order to reach my goal and win a battle. Her nightmare-inducing ability puts her foes into a dreamlike sequence that drives them crazy, to put it lightly. If she's able to do this, why doesn't she do that more? I get that she's intimidating as the Scarlet Witch, but why not use that power to make you even scarier? I will admit, it's disappointing that she hasn't used it since the Infinity Saga. It's a strong and unique power that makes her who she is as the Scarlet Witch. Kevin Feige, this is my formal request to make that happen. Though he only appeared in the MCU due to a multiversal event, Doc Ock has every right to be on this list as much as the previous 9 villains. A brilliant man who was corrupted by his own creation, Otto is one of a kind, and one of the best villains seen on the big screen in my opinion. While most of his powers come from his tentacles infused into him, there is one that has never been seen, and that's his ability to create high-speed winds. His tentacles allow him to create up to 50-mile-per-hour winds, and I'm surprised that this was never portrayed in Spider-Man 2 or No Way Home. It seems like it would be a useful power when his opponent is a guy who swings around with webs. Spider-Man coming at you? No problem. I'll just blow him away with my 4 extra arms. This is a huge miss by Marvel Studios. It's unlikely that he appears again, but if he does, I expect the wins to be pretty high that day. I know a lot of us like to see the happy ending when the heroes defeat the big bad villain, but after going over some of these powers, I find it very hard to believe that some of these MCU heroes stood a chance against their foes.
Of all the wonderful and mystical powers Stephen Strange possesses, apparently Scooby-Dooing this crap is not one of them. Doctor Strange is quickly becoming the new Tony Stark of the MCU.
Call me sir.
And by that I mean he has a fun habit of saving the universe from threats that he is ultimately responsible for creating. We've already seen him tangle with the likes of Dormammu, Thanos, and depending on the variant, led a multiversal team against Ultron.
You'd have to find me first.
It's no secret that Doctor Strange has great power, but it goes so far beyond what we can even imagine. Here are some of Doctor Strange's greatest powers you may not have known, or at least forgotten that he had. This one should come as no surprise. Though to my recollection, I can't think of Stephen Strange actually using it in the MCU. In the comics, Doctor Strange has an impressive level of telepathic abilities. Now, he's no Professor X, but through the mystic arts, Doctor Strange can read minds and manipulate them.
Take a seat.
Now, I say he's no Professor X, but that's the gold standard. Doctor Strange is basically the silver standard when it comes to powerful telepaths in the universe.
Hello.
He even used his telepathy to take down one of the greatest beings in the universe, Galactus, by putting images from the darkest corners of the universe directly into his mind, reducing the Devourer of Worlds into a crying ball in the corner. It sometimes goes unnoticed that characters have powers that they can fall back on should they ever try to ditch the superhero gig. Forget all the fancy hand-waving and magic capes. Stephen Strange has near superhuman intelligence. The dude was an accomplished neurosurgeon long before he ever touched the mystic arts. Something tells me that takes a brain cell or two. On top of that, the speed with which Stephen learned magic is a testament to his level of intelligence. Stephen is multilingual. He learned Sanskrit in a very short amount of time in order to read the spellbooks that would make him a better sorcerer.
And
Doctor Strange also once said that he got through medical school thanks to his photographic memory. All of these things really help contribute to the idea that Stephen has a genius-level intellect. When you add the knowledge of the cosmos and the mystic arts to that already big brain, it's easy to see why Doctor Strange rises above so many others. When facing the absolute terrors of the known multiverse, there's nothing like falling back on Old Reliable. Old Reliable in this case being shooting a beam out of your hand. Yes, you've probably noticed that Marvel's magic users' go-to weapon is shooting a concussive blast from their very fingertips. However, in Doctor Strange's case, these different forms of energy blasts have really cool names that you may not have known. Here's just a few to whet your appetite. There's bolts of bedevilment, crystals of Kandriar, daggers of Davaroth, and flames of Faltine. Yes, we all know that we've seen Doctor Strange utilize time travel in the MCU on a multitude of occasions, where he really wasn't allowed to. However, that was all thanks to the Eye of Agamotto, which in the MCU was actually the Time Stone. In the comics, let's just say the Eye is not that. Doctor Strange still has some level of time manipulation, however. In the non-physical realm, Stephen Strange can move at literally any speed. Using this power, he can travel through multiple dimensions, including time, in an instant. Also, Doctor Strange is stacked with power in the comics, as he has mental abilities to alter time, including freezing it, slowing it, and traveling through it all in an afternoon. He even has taught others this amazing power, making you realize how kind of irresponsible he is when you think about it. You really wouldn't think of this one, considering how little Stephen actually uses it. But behind all the magic and mysticism, Stephen Strange is actually pretty good with his fists. Now, he's no Shang-Chi, Black Widow, or even Hawkeye, but he can certainly hold his own. Like, he could probably at least take on the Leaper. The mystic arts isn't the only thing they teach at Kamar-Taj. Along with his sidekick in the comics, but Sorcerer Supreme in the MCU, Wong ensures that Stephen Strange stays in top fighting shape. Part of his daily training includes a sparring session. No magic allowed. His abilities are so understated, in fact, that he has even taken Wolverine in a fight, as well as the evil martial arts organization, The Hand. Most impressively, he has even defeated Dormammu, all with his fists. Personally, I think he was just showing off. Doctor Strange is immortal. Well, I mean, kinda. Doctor Strange has faced some of the wildest enemies of any Marvel hero, including the literal manifestation of death. As a result of this battle, Stephen Strange not only became fearless, which you know happens when you stare death in the face and win, but he actually gained some degree of immortality. He stopped aging and could no longer die of pesky old age. He was still vulnerable to physical attacks, so you know, a good old decapitation or stab to the heart still wouldn't be a very fun day. By passing this test, Doctor Strange became immune to disease as well, though he still does need to eat, breathe, and sleep. However, this was not the first time this power was achieved. Have you ever wondered why they're called the Ancient One? This power really makes you think that you should probably stop putting yourself in harm's way. Maybe make Wong go do all the fighting while you just retire to the library, huh, Steven? This next one is a power that we've seen Doctor Strange demonstrate before in the MCU. However, it was so brief that it may have slipped from your memory. Doctor Strange is able to make multiple copies of himself. These copies serve as an in-your-pocket ready-to-go army should you find yourself in a pinch against multiple opponents or a wrinkly-chinned purple alien. When Doctor Strange used this power against Thanos, the Mad Titan was quickly able to seek out the true Stephen Strange using the Soul Stone. It should also be noted that all of the copies moved in unison, meaning that I don't believe Stephen Strange has fully mastered this power in the MCU like he has in the comics. In the comics, his multiple copies are capable of moving freely and acting on their own. It might even be possible that the Soul Stone trick would not work on these copies, as each of them would have Stephen's soul as well. I hope we get to see him use this again, but based on the upcoming Multiverse of Madness, he may already have one too many Stephen Stranges to deal with. As we saw in Marvel's What If series, Doctor Strange has a shockingly frightening power. In order to gain more and more energy and magical ability, Doctor Strange has the power to absorb the life forces of any creature. He spent years absorbing magical beings from other universes in order to make himself strong enough to overcome an absolute point in time. These weren't exactly the prettiest creatures you've ever seen either, and most would think twice about literally absorbing them into their body.
Time to meet an old friend.
But Stephen Strange was desperate, and in the desperation we saw just how powerful this can be. He was able to become the most powerful being in his universe, so much so that his efforts led to the total destruction of it. This is definitely one of the more villainous powers that Stephen Strange possesses.
Wouldn't understand.
So I don't think it's incredibly likely that we would see the main Doctor Strange actively use it. Although I think simply sucking Thanos into his chest probably could have saved a life or two. After we saw the evil Doctor Strange from the Marvel What If universe absorb the life forces of several multi-dimensional creatures, we saw him drunk with power, including several new powers. One of his most impressive was the power to shapeshift. He was able to take the form of any of the creatures he had spent years absorbing, even being able to take on features of all of them at once. Evil Doctor Strange was even able to shift into the shadow of the alternate universe version of himself. Let's just say it makes him a master at hide and seek. After he ultimately absorbed the good version of Stephen Strange, the evil Strange was able to shapeshift into all the creatures he had absorbed at one time.
It's me, Christine.
If Doctor Strange didn't look like Benedict Cumberbatch already, I would tell him to absorb Benedict Cumberbatch and become a movie star using this power.
Okay.
Stephen Strange is sometimes too curious for his own good. However, sometimes he's just curious enough for the good of others. Doctor Strange has spent years tapping into all known and unknown sources of magic and mysticism. Throughout this time, Doctor Strange has learned to possess the spirits of ancient magical beings and focus them through the powers he exerts. The Crimson Bands of Cyttorak are one example. Doctor Strange can literally invoke powers of gods by actually channeling the very spirits of those gods through himself. This isn't exactly always the most ethical practice. The most famous example was during World War Hulk when Doctor Strange called upon a demon to try and stop the Green Rage monster. Let's just say it didn't work out and Strange got put in detention for even trying. This next power is one of the most understatedly powerful that a character can have. Just look at what Cersei of the Eternals was able to accomplish with her transmutation abilities. We have yet to see Doctor Strange demonstrate this specific power in the MCU, but it's essentially the equivalent of some of the powers of the Reality Stone, just on a smaller level. His powers of transmutation are somewhat limited, and he cannot create anything from thin air. Well, I shouldn't say anything. In the comics, he has turned guns into fireflies and objects into gold. A little more practice in this specific power could give him the ability to transmutate his greatest enemies into statues. Again, something that really could have been useful against the big purple alien that was actively trying to destroy half the universe. Get back to those books, Steven. Given the direction of the MCU and the parallel dimension the Sonyverse is going, this next power might come in handy for the good doctor to learn as soon as possible. Normally you need a wooden stake, some holy water, or at least a bit of garlic from your local supermarket, but vampires can be extremely difficult creatures to kill. After their tens of thousands of years of existence, however, you would think someone learned how to get rid of them a little bit easier. There's Blade and Morbius, but Doctor Strange has fought the big one, Dracula himself. Using an incantation called the Montesi Formula, Doctor Strange was able to turn every vampire on Earth into nothing but a pile of ashes. It was temporary, as years later vampires would return, but for crying out loud, we could have ended the Twilight movies at just one if Doctor Strange was around. Heroes like Doctor Strange have no shortness of enemies, and need to be on their toes at all times. They're called villains for a reason. They tend not to play fair. They will attack heroes in their weakest moments in order to get the upper hand. This likely means that he does have a pretty difficult time sleeping. Every time they fall into a deep sleep, they must subconsciously be thinking that they could be attacked at any moment. Well, Doctor Strange has certainly thought of this possibility. For one sleep cycle, Stephen Strange can chant a spell that completely protects him while he's unconscious. Unfortunately, like I said, this only works for one sleep cycle, so any unexpected napping or nodding off leaves the sorcerer completely vulnerable. When one of your greatest arch-nemeses is named Nightmare, it sounds like this power comes in handy more often than you would think. It's just gotta stink though, because Doctor Strange can never just have a big lunch and take that sweet 2 o'clock nap in the afternoon, lest he leave himself vulnerable to the evils of the multiverse.
Just a little higher.
An extreme violation of privacy, or an excellent opportunity to mess with people? You be the judge. Doctor Strange has a very interesting power called dream walking. In fact, Doctor Strange has said that this is the first lesson he learned on his journey to become a sorcerer. When going into his astral form, Stephen Strange has the power to enter the minds of those who are asleep. In many ways, it makes Doctor Strange a really good friend when he goes into your bad dreams and literally fights them to leave. This power helps introduce Stephen Strange to one of his greatest enemies, Nightmare. Nightmare preys on his victims by entering their subconscious while they sleep. The Hulk is great, but something tells me he'd be really ineffective against a foe like that.
Sun's going down. Sun's going down. That's it.
It is Stephen Strange who has the skills to not only protect the physical world, but your subconscious world as well. Doctor Strange has a heightened sixth sense. Sure, taste and smell are great, but how about using a mystical artifact to be able to achieve total universal awareness? By enhancing his consciousness through focused meditation, Doctor Strange can perceive any irregularities throughout the universe, including the hidden magical realm beneath the layer of reality. In the comics, the Eye of Agamotto aids Doctor Strange with this power as it allows him to sense anomalies throughout all of space and time. This gives Doctor Strange a serious heads up when extra-dimensional threats are headed his way. It really makes you wonder if Doctor Strange already knows that Kang is coming, and is sort of just deciding not to really do anything about it.
This is wild.
Except mess around helping a teenage boy nearly destroy his universe so that he can get into college.
That feels weird, but I'll allow it.
Doctor Strange has a very useful power that makes him probably the best member to have on your team.
You may regret that.
And I mean if you're doing anything. Saving the multiverse or trying to win your high school championship soccer game. Stephen Strange showed the ability to cast incredible protection spells. The dark version of Stephen Strange seen in the What If series used this power to protect the Guardians of the Multiverse.
The protection spell, you're welcome.
Killmonger, Party Thor, Captain Carter, T'Challa Star-Lord, and Gamora all received orange glowing body shields.
What is going on?
It's true that Ultron was able to weaken these with each punch as some of the magic would fade away with the more damage that it took. However, these are still incredibly helpful shields, as it prevented all of the members from basically just immediately being impaled. I know the dark version of Stephen Strange is more powerful than the one we know in the MCU.
Yes.
But my goodness, learning the spell should probably be the first thing our Stephen does. Just think, in recent memory alone, Tony Stark, Wong, and Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker were all stabbed while in the presence of the Sorcerer. A simple protection spell would likely save a few trips to the hospital. This one is Stephen's bread and butter, and he uses it in every film as though it's his go-to move. But I bet you didn't know it had a name. Stephen more often than not chooses to use Eldritch Magic.
The warnings come after the spell.
This allows him to create glowing physical manifestations from thin air. He then uses these to build tools, weapons, and shields. That's right, the orange circles and whips that Doctor Strange so often manifests during his physical confrontations are all used thanks to the power of Eldritch Magic. Conjuring Eldritch Magic is one of the first things we see Strange attempting to learn in the group session at Kamar-Taj. He thought his hands were holding him back, but Master Hamir showed him that sorcery, including an impressive display of Eldritch Magic, is all in your head. We have already seen Doctor Strange travel to several different dimensions in the MCU. However, his dimensional powers reach far beyond what you may think. For example, Doctor Strange has the ability to travel between dimensions without even having to use his sling ring. In Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange sent Spider-Man and himself to the mirror dimension on his own, and then I guess he quickly forgot he could do that when Peter took his ring from him. In the comics, Strange's ability to travel between dimensions is so much more powerful. Especially in his astral form, Strange can walk between the lines of reality with ease. Based on the title of his upcoming film, I would like to think that Strange has been at least practicing this ability for the madness that will be unleashed, and all the dimensions he visits should be one wild ride. That or it was all a dream. How funny would that be?
Things just got out of hand.
The more I learn about Moon Knight, the more fascinated I am with the character.
Oh, mate, thank you. Oh, thanks. Cheers.
He's one of the most interesting heroes in Marvel Comics and the MCU right now, and part of the reason is his wide assortment of hidden powers and abilities. Like, did you know he can control Mjolnir? Did you know his mind is protected from psychic attacks? Did you know he's basically immortal? See, a ton of hidden abilities that I want to talk about today. So here's the list of all sorts of Moon Knight special tricks and powers. Let's get started right now. One of Moon Knight's most interesting hidden abilities is the fact that he can wield Mjolnir. No, it's not because the avatar of Khonshu is worthy or anything like that, but it's because of one of the most amusing comic loopholes I've ever seen, and it all relates to what Thor's hammer is made out of. So we all know the hammer is made from Uru, which is an extremely rare Marvel metal. It's a metal ore that comes from the first moon in existence. When two elder gods were having a wrestling match, they destroyed the moon, and its pieces eventually crashed onto Nidavellir and was collected by dwarves. Those dwarves then presented a piece of Uru to Odin, who used his magic to trap a powerful raging cosmic storm called the God Tempest into the piece of Uru, and then told the dwarves to forge that piece into Mjolnir. Cool, right? Well, fast forward to today when Odin's enchantment means only those that are worthy can pick up Mjolnir. But because Moon Knight is the avatar of the moon god Khonshu, he comes with the ability to control any piece of moon-related material. So in this case, Moon Knight's ability to control moon rock trumps Mjolnir's enchantment, and Mark Spector once surprised Thor with this ability by smacking the God of Thunder with his own hammer. Now, it's a long shot for sure right now, but how cool would it be if we could see this moment in live action? Mjolnir is back after being destroyed, and Moon Knight hopefully has a bright future ahead of him in the MCU, so please, let's hope this moment can eventually happen. Moon Knight is practically immortal as long as he remains on Khonshu's good side. I always think immortality is a bit of an iffy superpower. For one, knowing a character is immortal sometimes takes all the narrative tension out of the situation. I mean, if you know that they aren't in real danger, then what exactly are the stakes? But on the other hand, if you're reading a comic book with your favorite hero, you know they aren't going to bite the bullet anytime soon anyway. And then the narrative is forced to find creative and interesting workarounds to the whole immortal situation. Just because a character is immortal doesn't mean they still can't be hurt both physically and emotionally. Anyways, being the avatar of Khonshu means that Mark is able to be revived by the powerful Egyptian god whenever his heart stops beating, and he's been resurrected in the comics a bunch of times. You know, if this was me, I'd probably try testing this out to see how much I could annoy Khonshu. Oh, I'm super allergic to peanuts and would basically explode if I ever touch one, but I would eat peanut butter sandwiches all the time if I knew Khonshu wanted to keep me alive. Although it's easy to just think of Moon Knight as just a vigilante with cool upgraded weapons and an Egyptian god watching his back, there are hidden mystical abilities that Moon Knight has been known to tap into from time to time. Most famously, in the Age of Khonshu crossover comic, Moon Knight basically breaks bad and turns against all his fellow Avengers because Khonshu told him to. This led to him using his pair of magic ankhs to battle and steal things from heroes like Iron Fist, Doctor Strange, and Ghost Rider. Well, in Ghost Rider's case, Moon Knight didn't necessarily as much fight him than he did steal his car, but that's sort of the same thing, right? This overall shows how in tune Mark generally is with mysticism and how he can use that to his advantage to best some of the strongest magic users in Marvel Comics. Though this ability did have a limitation. When stealing abilities from other heroes, Mark used a divine ankh, but that ankh was useless against someone like Black Panther because Black Panther's abilities literally coursed through his veins thanks to the heart-shaped herb, and Moon Knight couldn't steal that. I kinda hope they adapt the Age of Khonshu storyline in the MCU at one point, because as cool as it is seeing Moon Knight be the hero, I would want to see the other Avengers have to face him in all his wonderful personalities in order to stop some nefarious deed. So this list is all about hidden abilities and powers that Moon Knight has, and sometimes a hidden ability can be just knowing the right people. Moon Knight is very close with a weapons designer known as Buck Lime, and Buck is known for making all sorts of cool weapons for Moon Knight that mimic other famous heroes. For example, Moon Knight has been known to use copied items like a Captain America shield, Spider-Man's web shooters, and even Wolverine's claws. Man, Moon Knight is already pretty cool, but imagine he shows up on the battlefield and whips out his fancy energy shield shaped like Captain America's shield, then stabs you with his retractable Wolverine claws, and then swings away using some homemade web shooters. You'd probably be in equal amounts confusion and pain. Now all I can do is picture a fight in the MCU between Moon Knight and Taskmaster. But seriously, Buck Lime is a great connection for Moon Knight to have and gives him all sorts of unique and fun weapons that aren't all Egyptian related. He could be the next great guy in the chair and give characters like Ned Leeds a run for their money. Some would call Mark's dissociative identity disorder a hindrance in a fight, but it does have its advantages. Obviously, all of Mark's personalities are capable of helping in different, unique ways when necessary, and although it creates a bit of turmoil within Mark's mind, his disorder has helped make him this incredibly complex hero in the comics. And though there are some that would call his mind a mess, it actually helps against psychic users who specialize in mind attacks. Say there's a villain who wants to target him with possession or some type of mental control. Well, they would find that Mark's mind is so chaotic that it wouldn't necessarily work. We've seen that in effect in the comics when everyone around him comes under a mental attack and Moon Knight is left standing around with a "hey, what's happening" attitude. Classic Moon Knight. But maybe that's not giving Khonshu enough credit. The big question is how much of that protection is due to his disorder and how much of it is because of Khonshu's influence on his life. It's probably a mixture of both. Those two factors together create a strong mental fortitude against oncoming attacks. And as we've seen in the comics, anyone who tries to invade Mark's mind to take over or try to cause harm usually does not have a good time. Mark has said that his disorder and his Khonshu interactions have turned his mind into poisoned ground, so it's best not to mess with him. We've seen this in the MCU show specifically, but Moon Knight is also incredibly damage resistant. Like in the Disney Plus show, we know that when Mark summons his suit, either in its OG Moon Knight form or in the more stylish Mr. Knight fit, he can definitely take a few hits. We see his cape becomes bulletproof and that his body heals almost instantly from life-threatening impalings, which is just kind of funny to me. Like, you're saying the cape can stop bullets, but his regular front part, which presumably should be made out of the same material, isn't strong enough to stop people with sharp spears stabbing right through Mark's body. But while the magic suit giving him damage resistance is the explanation in the TV show, I think that's a bit different than what we see in the comics. There, we see that Mark has just a regular suit that's reinforced with strong material, and that's what allows him to be a bit more damage resistant overall. Also, in the comics, he just doesn't mind the pain that much. He has a high tolerance for pain and torture in general, which makes him less inclined to block incoming attacks that come his way. I mean, that's his whole thing, right? He wears bright white because he wants his enemies to see him coming, and that's the mindset of someone who doesn't really feel as much pain as you and me. When you're dealing with someone named Moon Knight, then you would expect that the moon has something to do with his powers. And guess what? You'd be right. Whatever phase the moon is in does absolutely affect Mark's abilities. So here's a word of advice: never fight Moon Knight on a full moon. That's basically a recipe for disaster. When the moon is at its peak like that, then so is Mark Spector. That also means that other moon phases like waning or waxing or new moon all directly affect Moon Knight's strength and durability. So if you do decide to commit to a life of crime and you know Moon Knight is around, maybe just brush up on your lunar terminology a bit, might help you out. And this is why I want to see Moon Knight fight Werewolf by Night in the MCU. Both characters are at their most powerful whenever the moon is full, which makes them just overall fun counterpoints to each other. When Moon Knight has the spirit of Khonshu flowing through him, he's been known to raise the dead from time to time. Now, that's an equally impressive and terrifying ability to have in your back pocket. Especially now that we've seen undead mummies in the MCU, those things were terrifying. That was definitely the scariest thing I've seen in the MCU since I saw Dr. Eric Selvig streaking in Thor: The Dark World. But now imagine a scenario where in the MCU, Moon Knight raises an army of those mummies and controls them? Terrifying. In the comics, Moon Knight has used this to help defeat Doctor Strange, which makes sense. You need a powerful hidden ability like necromancy to beat the Sorcerer Supreme. Like a lot of these abilities, this is only one that Mark can use when he's fully tapping into Khonshu's powers, and all it does is confirm that these Egyptian deities are no joke. Quick, Moon Knight to the Mooncopter. Okay, I know that being an expert pilot isn't a really strong or interesting hidden ability on its own, but I just wanted to include it because it allows me to talk about the Mooncopter. So because of his long history as a mercenary, of course Mark knows how to pilot aircrafts. But because comics are goofy sometimes, this has led to things like the Mooncopter, which is the aircraft that Mark uses to get around in the comics. It's an advanced aircraft that's, yes, shaped a bit like a moon Moon Crescent and is equipped with a series of weapons and fancy technological upgrades. And come on, Mooncopter? Call it something else, Mark. How about the Nightwing? Yeah, okay, I guess you'd run into some copyright issues there. Oh well. And really, I guess I shouldn't discount the pilot ability. I mean, how many Avengers do you know that can fly an aircraft? I remember Bruce Banner, one of the smartest men in the universe, freaking out over flying that ship in Thor Ragnarok.
I don't know how to fly one of these. You're a scientist. Use one of your PhDs.
Yeah, all of a sudden the ability to fly a plane really comes in handy, doesn't it? At one point, Moon Knight could pass through solid objects, sort of like vision. There's a bit more to the ability than that though, and it's not as simple as it sounds. This happened after Moon Knight had returned home from a time-traveling adventure and he found that he could see the world through Khonshu's eyes. He saw ghostly images everywhere, and when he stepped outside, he phased right through his glass door and was immediately dressed in his Moon Knight costume. It allowed him overall to be a much stronger servant to Khonshu, and honestly, I hope we see a version of this in the MCU in some capacity. Like, the next step in the MCU partnership between Khonshu and Mark would be a merging of their minds, and Mark could become a stronger avatar because of it. I think that sounds cool. The MCU show has been focused on its Indiana Jones adventure tone, and I think that's great for this season, but if Moon Knight does return in the future, I really hope they emphasize his detective abilities a bit more back in a New York setting, because the real treat of a lot of Moon Knight comics is seeing Mark use his three personalities to solve crimes and showcase his detective skills. Mark is obviously the brute force and general weapon, Stephen Grant is the millionaire businessman who rubs elbows with the elite, and then Jake Lockley is the cab driver with street connections. All those working together ensures that Moon Knight has a great ear to the pulse of the city and knows more than a lot of people, which he then uses to get information. I understand that the show didn't want to highlight this as much because they wanted to set him apart from DC's Batman, but I don't think it copies the Caped Crusader if done correctly. So because I've mentioned before how his mystical Ankh allowed him to capture other heroes' abilities, and I thought I should go ahead and mention the rest of his arsenal. This may not be a hidden power per se, but his ability to be dangerous with just about any weapon you put in his hand certainly deserves a mention. Let's not forget Mark was a highly proficient mercenary, so he's proficient with almost all firearms. But besides being an expert marksman, he's also great with swords, batons, chains, boomerangs, longbows, you name it, Moon Knight can use it. And on top of that, he has his iconic crescent darts, which are like batarangs, only crescent shaped, as well as his multi-purpose truncheon that can be used as a club, a staff, a grappling hook, etc. And like I mentioned, the Ankhs he carries are both solid blunt instruments that could easily put you in the hospital, as well as being significant mystical weapons. When a hero is a great fighter in the MCU, it usually doesn't properly showcase it. And what we've seen from Mark in the show, yes, he's highly proficient and fun to watch as he takes down bad guys, but it isn't the best representation of what Moon Knight is supposed to be able to do. To start, Mark is normally a former heavyweight boxing champion, which is already dangerous, but then on top of that, he's also a master martial artist who knows judo, Krav Maga, karate, Muay Thai, Kung Fu, all of it. He really doesn't need any magical ability when he's able to do all that. Okay, some people might not consider this a hidden superpower, but Bruce Wayne once said it was, so I'm counting it. Moon Knight is tremendously wealthy. Like, he's a billionaire. In the comics, he's worth an estimated $2.3 billion, which is just insane. In the comics, he uses that money to always buy the most advanced weapons, suits, vehicles, gadgets, etc. He also probably has to buy a lot of whiteout and stain remover to keep his clothes as pearly white as he normally does. I just assume his dry cleaning bill isn't cheap is all I'm saying. Anyways, anyone who's that rich and still decides to dress up and fight crime is an interesting case study to examine. The money comparisons once again make Moon Knight traditionally compared to Bruce Wayne or even Tony Stark. But unlike those two, Mark became this rich because I guess he was just a great investor. So maybe being rich isn't a great hidden ability, but I would say being great with money management certainly counts, right? I wanted to end things on a bit of a fun one. One time, due to some comic book shenanigans, the characters of Peter Parker and Mark Spector were combined to make Arachnite. This was basically Peter Parker, but with 4 separate identities who was once bitten by a mystical spider that granted him powers and shattered his mind. So it was a Peter Parker version of Moon Knight with all of Spider-Man's abilities. Is this a long way of saying I want MCU's Peter Parker to meet Oscar Isaac's Moon Knight, just so it would be funny to see that live live-action meeting while simultaneously seeing Oscar Isaac's Spider-Man 2099 meet Miles Morales in the animated Spider-Verse movies? Yes it is.
I know Wanda's terrifying, but I still say the lady who yelled at me for breaking her window with a baseball when I was a kid takes the top prize for scariest suburban mom. Believed by many to be the most powerful being in the MCU at this very moment, Wanda Maximoff is the definition of a bag of tricks.
I'd like you to meet the Scarlet Witch.
Sorry, Loki, Strange, the Ancient One, Frigga, and that red sorcerer guy who goes on adventures with Sylvester Stallone. But your magical abilities are child's play compared to the Scarlet Witch. We've seen several of her abilities already on display in the MCU, taking down powerhouses like Tony Stark, the Hulk, and Thanos. However, Wanda has several abilities you may not be aware of. Let's check some of them out right now. If I could choose to have any one power, I genuinely think the one that would make my life improve the most is the ability to teleport. Hello, exotic vacation every weekend. In the MCU, we have seen Wanda Maximoff's preferred way of travel evolve from concussive blasts that just propel her through the air, all the way up to fully controlled flight. In the comics, however, she has gone one step further, and gained the ability to magically teleport herself anywhere in the blink of an eye. This is incredible power that a character like Cloak thought made them special. Essentially, Wanda has a built-in sling ring. If Peter had gone to Wanda for help instead of Stephen Strange, she never would have gotten trapped in the mirror dimension because she has the capability of bringing herself back all on her own. Of all the things Wanda can do, adding this one to the list is really just unfair.
Oh.
Wanda has the power of the Space Stone without actually needing the stone in the form of her teleportation. It stands to reason that some other Infinity Stone powers would surface themselves within her as well. Who needs the ether when you have Wanda Maximoff? The Scarlet Witch on several occasions has shown the ability to completely rewrite reality. Most recently, this came in the form of the Westview incident. You remember when Wanda completely transformed a New Jersey suburb into her own personal sitcom so she could live out her fantasy life with her deceased android boyfriend and manifest kids from thin air? Ah, the good old days. The Hex was not the only time Wanda displayed this ability, and each time it is an impressive feat of power. The Ether was capable of bringing the world to total darkness, or creating an entirely different landscape than the one before you. These are things that the Scarlet Witch could do in her sleep.
Yes, dear.
You may remember a certain conversation between Wanda and Agatha Harkness in the final episode of WandaVision, when Agatha mentioned a little thing known as chaos magic.
This is chaos magic, Wanda.
This is a wildly powerful and nearly uncontrollable form of magic that gives the user an absurd amount of abilities. This is something that puts Wanda on a whole other level from any other type of sorcerer in the Marvel Universe. The origin of Wanda's chaos magic has changed from time to time, but originally it is said that she was marked by the demon Chthon when she was a child, imbuing her with this incredible power from a very young age. More recently, it was said that Wanda's chaos magic is more cosmic in origin. This strikes fear in anyone who practices the art of witchcraft, as they know that dealing with chaos magic is a feat that none should really attempt. It is said that Wanda's body is so strong with it that even if her brain were to be removed, her body would still be emanating an incredible amount of it. Now you know why Zombie Wanda was basically Queen of the Zombies.
Run.
One of the most powerful things in the universe is the Phoenix Force. Heck, it's already ruined 2 separate X-Men franchise timelines. The Phoenix Force imbues characters with incredible and near unstoppable power. Of course, it's near unstoppable, the Scarlet Witch exists. While several characters have been able to house the Phoenix Force, sometimes even multiple at one time, the most notable vessel that this power has taken over is that of the mutant Jean Grey. At some points in the comics, she is even known as the Phoenix. Again, I hate to harp on this, but the movies have tried and failed to play the storyline out twice now. Who knows, maybe with the MCU we will finally see the Dark Phoenix storyline done correctly. However, even so, if Wanda Maximoff is still around at that point, Jean Grey may not be able to reach her full potential for destructive power. The powers of the Scarlet Witch match, and in many times supersede that of the Phoenix Force. The Force itself is a kind of virus, attempting to take over and overpower the mind of its host. Jean Grey is actually the only one who is able to keep it at bay, but eventually even she fell victim to the awesome power of the Phoenix Force. However, Wanda Maximoff showed her incredible strength when she became the only one to actually resist the entire power of the Phoenix Force, as it tried to take her over as well. The Phoenix Force could undo reality itself, and yet it is no match for the Scarlet Witch. Sometimes the simpler powers are actually the more surprising. For example, we know the Scarlet Witch has some very weird powers, but did you know that she could actually hold her own in just a normal fistfight? It's true there have been times in the comics where Wanda loses her magical abilities for a time. The reasons are rarely not ridiculous, but ultimately it forces Wanda to go through some difficult times. In these moments, however, Wanda shows off a power that not many people knew she had. Without any magical abilities, she is still one heck of a fighter. She has spent so much time with the Avengers that characters who have mastered hand-to-hand combat, such as Captain America, Black Widow, and most notably Hawkeye, have spent hours and hours training her in the art of kicking butt without superpowers. Now granted, she'd probably have a much harder time with Thanos if she tried to fight him in this state, but your average street-level criminals might be in for quite a shock when regular old Wanda Maximoff knocks them out cold. It's nice to know that when Wanda inevitably gets her power taken away for taking over one too many suburbs, that she won't be left completely defenseless. Wanda has a relatively unknown power that is more annoying to her enemies than anything else. Wanda has the ability to manipulate probability fields, effectively causing events to happen by affecting the probability that they will happen. All this is fancy talk to say that she has the ability to manipulate luck.
Of course, thank you.
The Scarlet Witch has the capability to cause unspeakable bad luck to anyone she chooses. She can make Cap miss his train, Tony drop his scotch, or make Thanos trip and fall on his own sword. The applications of this power range from silly to incredibly effective. It's also understated just how powerful this ability is. She has such a mastery of manipulation over this particular aspect of life that she can even cancel out the good luck powers of the mutant Domino.
This is gonna be fun.
Domino is known for having solely good luck in her adventures, and yes, it's incredibly cinematic. The fact that Wanda is able to counteract this shows what insane levels of power she has. That being said, I like to imagine Wanda just chilling in an apartment, causing Thor to just have a bad day.
I'm not talking to you.
While it's true Wanda from time to time is known to cause a lot of damage, she also has the occasional miracle tucked up her sleeve. One of the most impressive feats of power used for good is the favor she did for Professor Charles Xavier. Professor X is known as the world's most powerful mind reader, but the other thing he is most associated with is his iconic wheelchair. Professor X has tried everything possible to regain the use of his legs. Some of the smartest people in the universe, like Reed Richards, Hank Pym, and Doctor Strange, have all said that Charles Xavier will never walk again, as finding a solution is impossible. Have you noticed a lot of these entries deal with things that are supposed to be impossible? Using her powers, Wanda was able to give Professor X the use of his legs again. I'm pretty sure it was for some sort of manipulation, so he would use his powers for her. But regardless, it's still a sweet gesture, and it's the thought that counts, right? Vision is perhaps one of the strongest heroes in the Marvel Universe. Heck, with the mind of Ultron, we saw him cut the Mad Titan directly in half. And I know what you're gonna say, that's just lazy screenwriting.
Fascinating.
Anyway, moving on. Vision and Wanda go together like peanut butter and jelly, if peanut butter and jelly had the collective power to destroy the universe. You think in any other relationship, Vision could stay out at the bar late and not worry about his wife's wrath when he returns. However, he fell for possibly the one person he should be most careful with. Obviously, this is because of Wanda's incredible power, but one in particular makes Vision extremely susceptible to danger. Wanda has the unique ability to short-circuit machinery and electrical devices, which is always my excuse when I turn in assignments late for class. Look, I had it written, but the Scarlet Witch stopped by. What am I supposed to do? Some of the toughest foes in the universe are electronically based. Ultron, the Sentinels, and yes, even the love of her life, Vision. The adamantium and vibranium shells of these characters cause lots of problems for many of Marvel's heroes, but Wanda can bypass right by them and mess with their mechanical insides. The Scarlet Witch has incurable, incredible power. Many struggle to even describe some of the abilities she possesses, but every now and then it doesn't hurt to fall back on the old reliable shooting a beam out of your hand. Wanda has a power called the Hex Bolt. She's able to fire powerful concussive blasts directly from her hands. Now, these hex bolts will likely not change the fabric of reality, nor will they deactivate the most powerful machines. But not every bank robber needs to be sent to another dimension in order to learn a lesson. Sometimes knocking them on their butt does the trick. Wanda's hex bolts are very powerful, and are said to be comparable to the concussive blast that Cyclops produces from his eyes. They are often her weapon of choice in physical altercations. They are able to do quite a bit of damage, or if Wanda can control them, they essentially amount to a pretty strong punch in the face. In the MCU alone, we have seen her use these hex bolts against the likes of Ultron, Agatha Harkness, and even the Mad Titan Thanos. They are certainly not her greatest power, or her flashiest. But ask yourself if you'd like to get hit in the face with something called a hex bolt from one of the most powerful heroes in the universe. Yeah, me neither. One of the craziest things that has happened in the MCU and Marvel Comics is when Thanos used the Infinity Stones to snap away half the population of the entire universe. It took him a long and grueling quest to even locate the stones, and then an incredible battle to see that they were used for his glorious purpose. That to me sounds like a lot of effort. If only there were an easier way to make half the universe disappear. Oh wait, that's right, Wanda Maximoff. Wanda is so powerful that she can accomplish the snap without the use of any Infinity Stones. Wanda's ability to rewrite reality essentially could produce the same effect as the snap if she were to concentrate all of her power. She was able to transform an entire town back to the 1960s and lock the kids away in their room. On an off day, I'm sure she could turn half the universe to dust if she really wanted. Based on all the bruises and cuts that Wanda has received in the MCU during various fights, I think it's safe to say that she hasn't quite mastered this ability that her comic book counterpart has. We have seen Wanda create various force fields powerful enough to stop even some of the strongest opponents. However, there is a level of power she could achieve to where she doesn't even have to consider this. There are various points in the comics where Wanda is so powerful that she is shown to be constantly emanating an energy barrier that doesn't allow anyone to even touch her. Trying to punch her or even take a cheap shot would basically be like punching a cement wall. The magic within Wanda's body is so strong that it becomes protective of its host. We saw how powerful her force field was when she was able to contain an explosion for a brief time at the beginning of Captain America: Civil War. When Wanda realizes her full potential of power, that force field could be invisibly surrounding her literally at all times. Imagine never having to worry about stubbing your toe again. These are the things I think of. Imagine it with me if you will. You spend your whole life idolizing people like Captain America or the Hulk, dreaming of one day being a superhero. Then one incredible day you get bitten by that spider or fall into that vat of chemicals, and you're ready to be the next great hero. Then you run into the Scarlet Witch, who has lost it again and taken over yet another suburban town to play house, and it's your job to stop her. Then you learn that one of the abilities that the Scarlet Witch has is to take away others' superpowers. Wanda's power levels differ based on who happens to be writing her at the time, but she definitely has had the ability to accomplish this. Never mind the whole No More Mutants incident where an entire population of people lost their powers, but on an individual level she has been shown to be able to take away a hero or villain's bread and butter. It's an incredible power that weakens her, but essentially ends the fight before it even begins. She's basically Avatar Aang in a red suit and headdress. Kinda awesome if you ask me. While Wanda can handle most people on her own, there have been times where she could use a little bit of help. Luckily, this really isn't a problem. Wanda has shown the ability to have access to other dimensions. Because of this, she is able to basically conjure armies of people to fight at her side at will. She has fought entire armies by bringing in multi-dimensional threats to do her bidding for her. On top of this, Wanda is a skilled tactician, which is often underappreciated. She has an incredible knowledge of battle and combat that comes into play quite often. Once she conjures these armies, she is also often the best person to lead them. Heck, even as a zombie in What If, she was basically the zombie queen. She can access an untold number of extremely dangerous dimensions and bring forth the creatures that roam those lands to take down any opposing force that dares to cross her. Basically, she's the ultimate girl boss. The Celestials are some of the most powerful creatures of creation and destruction in the known multiverse. They build entire worlds and love conducting experiments that affect entire civilizations. Some of these experiments have led to some of our favorite Marvel heroes and villains millions of years later. The Celestials are most known for their dabbling in genetics that created the Eternals and the Deviants. Eventually, these manipulated genes would evolve and create the X gene responsible for all of the world's mutants.
Splendid.
In the House of M storyline, Wanda Maximoff erased this gene from the majority of the mutant population simply by uttering a simple phrase. This kind of magic is obviously some of Wanda's most impressive stuff, but it's even more incredible when you put it in the frame of reference of the Celestials. Essentially, millions of years of genetic work done by gods was undone in an instant. This means that Wanda's power is on the same level, if not in excess of that of the Celestials. I'm just glad Wanda didn't say no more comic nerds. One of Wanda's most incredible powers is her ability to match the powers of someone on the level of Professor X. Her powers are not mental in nature, but she can produce all of the same effects as the most powerful mind in the world. She has incredible telekinetic abilities, but more importantly has a basic mastery of mind control. She was able to use this on all of the Avengers in Age of Ultron, and made the citizens of Westview act as though they were okay with everything that was happening. She can basically bend anyone to her will, and has evolved so far beyond just a little witch who messes with your mind. She's getting to the point where if she wanted to, she could have the entire world waiting on her hand and foot. Sure, he's got godlike power, but did you know that his fingers make sparkles? Thor, the god of thunder and prince of Asgard, may just seem like a big oaf at times.
Don't need anybody else.
But the truth is, he is one of the most powerful heroes ever to avenge. We have seen him display an incredible amount of powers in the MCU, and use those powers to defeat aliens, robots, and adopted brothers alike. We know about the lightning, but Thor has a ton of powers you may not even be aware of. Let's check out some of the tricks Thor has up his sleeve, you know, when he decides to wear sleeves, right now. Thor may not be the Flash, Makari, or even Quicksilver, but super speed is definitely on the list of his abilities that you may not have been aware of. Using Mjolnir, we have seen Thor fly at supersonic speeds. The hammer itself can travel large distances through space between planets in a very short amount of time, as seen in Thor: The Dark World. But even without his hammer, Thor is pretty quick on his feet. He has an Asgardian physique, which naturally gives him a physical advantage in just about every area.
Me.
Heck, even when he was turned into just a normal human, he could probably beat most Olympic athletes in a foot race. But on top of his Asgardian physique, Thor has spent his whole life training his body to be the body of one of the greatest warriors in the universe. Needless to say, he doesn't skip leg day.
As if.
We have seen some brief moments of speed from Thor in the MCU, like in Avengers: Age of Ultron, but I don't think he has had a real test yet. Him and Makari should race like Superman and the Flash in the post-credit scene of Justice League. Maybe with a less ridiculous wager of brunch.
I like it.
And listen, I mean, Makari would probably stomp him in the ground, but Thor might be able to keep up. Some powers are just too cool not to give every hero a chance at trying them out. When Marvel launched the Ultimate Universe, we saw variations on characters we had come to know and love, often making them even more powerful than we thought ever possible. Thor is definitely no exception to benefiting from what the Ultimate Universe had to offer. Thor told Jane that where he comes from, science and magic are often one and the same. This is never more true for the Ultimate Thor. Using rune magic, Thor in this universe has the capability of literal teleportation across all of space and dimensional reality. The extent of his teleportation powers is actually unknown. But hey, I would settle for even a little bit of teleportation. Just would really make my morning commute easier. This Thor is significantly stronger than the one we know, as Mjolnir is more of a toy than something that actually gives him power. His personality is a little different, as he is quite arrogant, but he is stacked with power. The closest we've seen to this in the MCU is when Stormbreaker gave Thor the power of the Bifrost at his fingertips. Now that's no teleportation, but it beats taking the train. Did you know Thor is basically a Mortal Kombat character? He's got a finishing move with a great name and everything. One of Thor's most incredible powers is the God Blast. The God Blast occurs when Thor has full access to the entirety of his power. In the comics, this was achievable thanks to Doctor Strange. All his life, Thor used his hammer to focus his power and not to actually increase it. Doctor Strange decided that Thor and Mjolnir's life forces should be bonded together, so they essentially became one. If one got hurt, so did the other. This gave Thor access to power he had never seen before. The God Blast was a really cool side effect. It has the ability to kill anything in its vicinity, even characters believed to be immortal. Thor has incredible strength and power. We have seen him display this on a number of times. He took on the Hulk hand-to-hand, he wrecked shop in the Battle of New York, and he even killed Thanos. All this, and I still don't think we have seen Thor reach his full potential and perform the God Blast yet. There are a few times that seem to come close. Some examples include his strike that blew up Sokovia, his lightning blast that struck down Hela in Ragnarok, and his first strike with Stormbreaker after his entrance in the Battle of Wakanda. I don't think any of these were the actual God Blast, which means that we could still finally see a fully powered Thor perform it. And my demigod, what a sight that would be. Sure, I get winded just walking up a flight of stairs, but why not give the already perfect God of Thunder superhuman stamina as well? Like many of his Avengers friends, Thor has an insanely increased ability to just keep going. The fight in him lasts so much longer than anyone else that he could keep entire battles going for months. It was said that Captain America had one of the greatest staminas of any hero. His whole catchphrase is that he could do this all day.
Yeah, I know.
Well, Thor's catchphrase should be that he could do this all year. As great as Cap is, Thor's stamina far outmatches Captain America in every way. Every now and then he does have to stop to rejuvenate, so his stamina is not limitless. But thanks to Thor's physiological makeup of being an Asgardian and an Elder God, His abilities outmatch even his fellow Asgardians like the Warriors 3 and his adopted brother Loki.
They're so helpless and ridiculous.
Basically, Thor really doesn't care that the elevator in my building keeps breaking down. Tell me if this bothers you as much as it bothers me. After seeing all of the lavish feasts they have on Asgard, celebrating every battle win or second cousin's birthday, you learn that some Asgardians don't even need to eat, at least not very often. Now I'm just sitting here angry at Volstagg, just chomping away that perfectly good roasted turkey that he doesn't even need. It is true though, some Asgardians have such an incredible metabolism that their body is self-sustaining. Thor is definitely no exception to this incredible power. This makes a lot of sense when you realize that Thor being mortal for the first time in his movie meant that it was time to pig out. He even claims that his mortal form has grown weak and he requires sustenance. This is because Thor is used to not needing such primitive things. And it's not just food. Thor can go extremely long periods of time without water or drinks of any kind, as well as air and sleep. It has been said in some comics that Thor has fought entire armies of creatures for over a year straight, without stopping to even take a bathroom break, let alone have a snack. The MCU has sort of ditched this idea, but for a long time in the comics, superheroes actually had secret identities. Now, I don't think Doctor Strange can pull a No Way Home for every single superhero, so it's possible we may never see Thor's fully realized. Can you imagine it though? Our Chris Hemsworth Thor going toe-to-toe with Loki from the 2011 TV movie Almighty Thor. What a wild time the early 2010s were.
Almighty Thor.
Anyway, in the comics, Thor, like all his fellow heroes, kept a secret identity. The MCU hinted at it in 2011's Thor, as Jane Foster's ex-boyfriend Donald Blake just so happens to share the name with Thor's alter ego. In the comics, Thor was actually given the power of transformation, which he would use to go back and forth between being the God of Thunder and regular Donald Blake. He obviously didn't have a mask to hide his face, so like the great heroes before him like Superman and Wonder Woman, just a quick spin completely changed his outfit and appearance, enough to fool even the best investigative journalists. There have been other times where Donald Blake is a totally separate character who Thor shares a body with, but originally he was Thor's alter ego, created by Odin to teach Thor a lesson, until one day Blake wandered into a cave, found Mjolnir, and transformed back into the God of Thunder. I hear now he just goes on 2 dates at once and really Mrs. Doubtfire's the whole situation. I bet you didn't know Thor has the all-tongue.
Thank you very much for your help. Good luck.
Okay, hopefully I haven't lost you yet. The Marvel Universe is filled with a near unlimited amount of alien species and creatures. And to think that they all speak a language that came from a European country on a tiny rock in the Milky Way galaxy is just foolish. There are at minimum billions of languages that exist in the known universe.
Myself, my name is Korg. I'm kind of like the leader in here.
Comics, however, are a different story. Thor is a character who needs to be able to converse with any creatures in the universe, seeing as he is royalty from possibly the most powerful realm to exist. To do this, Thor uses the All-Tongue. I get it, Asgard could probably have better names for things. The All-Tongue allows any creatures to hear Thor as though he was speaking in their native language.
We'll have to learn about life.
So yes, it sounds gross, but it's pretty cool. Look, I love Frigga as much as the next guy, but in the comics, Frigga is not the mother of Thor. Thor is actually the son of Odin and the elder goddess named Gaia. She just so happens to also go by the name of Mother Earth. It really explains Thor's affinity for Earth and why he is so drawn to protecting the people of it. But it also explains another one of Thor's cool powers. Thor is basically invulnerable to anything Earth can throw at him. He has immunity to all diseases and can survive in either the hottest or the coldest temperatures on the planet, all while wearing a sleeveless tee. On top of his internal immunity, Thor basically has invulnerability against most opponents in battle. His skin is impenetrable against weapons made by humans, and he has flown to the center of the sun and lived to tell the tale. So for all those wondering who would win in a fight between the eternal Icarus and the God of Thunder, I think it becomes pretty clear. In the MCU, Thor is not quite as invulnerable as his comic counterpart, as he has definitely gotten a few bumps and scrapes here and there. However, I think he probably takes a punch better than Hawkeye. There are certain heroes who are basically just human, but better in every way. Captain America is definitely on a whole other level of humanity, whose body and senses have far surpassed his fellow citizens. Thor is about 10 steps above that. This is especially true when it comes to his senses. Thor has been said to be able to see across worlds. He also at times has similar sight powers to that of Heimdall, seeing across the galaxy. He can hear cries of help from the other side of the world. I bet he smells really well too. and we already talked about the Alltongue. But in all seriousness, Thor is in essence just an advanced human, and his senses really contribute to his ability to save and avenge. Thanks to Thor's Asgardian physique, one of the incredible powers you may not have known that he had was superhuman healing. Now I say may not have because I don't think just anyone could take a 1,000-foot drop punch from the Hulk in the face only to wake up a couple hours later with a slight headache. Needless to say, if you didn't guess he had this one, you're missing a few things. But it is true that while very few things can actually harm Thor, the things that can only do their damage and then quickly get healed shortly thereafter. He's certainly not on the healing factor level of someone like Deadpool or Wolverine, but the guy can likely start fighting again the next day. We have seen Thor take a beating from Thanos, be nearly stabbed to death by his totally normal and not crazy at all sister,
the goddess of death.
And when the Destroyer actually killed his mortal form in Thor, the return of his hammer saw all those wounds disappear. Just imagine what it's like living your whole life never having experienced a paper cut. There was a time in Marvel Comics when Thor fell into a deep sleep, and the heroes of the world desperately needed him. Upon his awakening, Thor realized his full power in order to save everyone.
Let's go to bed.
His full power included a mastery over the earth. He already has the ability to control lightning, as well as use wind currents to fly and blow his enemies away. It's also said that Thor can create chasms and mountains. He can reshape swatches of land and utilize the earth as a weapon against some more powerful enemies. This power is obviously a gift passed down from his mother. For those who don't recall, Thor's mother is the elder goddess Gaia. She is the goddess of the earth, also known as Mother Earth. So it would stand to reason that part of her son's power set would be to control the very earth he is destined to protect. So if you've been following along carefully, you'll realize Thor's an earthbender. Thor also has absolute and total mind control powers. No, I kid, Thor's great, but let's not turn him into the one above all here. With that being said, you may be surprised to learn that Thor does have some level of mental capability. An example of this is his relationship with Mjolnir. Thor uses his mind to communicate with his longtime trusty hammer. He gives it commands and controls it from a distance, all with his mind. He has an incredibly strong will, and has used some level of mental telepathy to take over other things as well. In one storyline, the goddess of death Hela, who was not exactly his sister at the time, cursed Thor to have a weak and brittle body. Thor was able to take control of the Destroyer armor using only his mind in order to fight Hela and have the curse reversed. So see, he's not just a big dumb jock all the time. So we know that Thor has a strong will, and has used it to control some things with his mind, but his powers go even beyond that. Not only does Thor have some level of mental ability, but his power to resist mental attacks is equally impressive. Sure, he can't take over someone's mind like Druig or Professor X, but he has shown the ability to at least resist such powers. Is it because he has such a thick skull?
Asgard, these coins are worth a gazillion.
No comment. He does always succumb to the universe's most powerful telepaths, but just being able to resist for a time is incredible all itself. It's always good to know that some of your favorite heroes will be okay should they ever lose their powers permanently. And by okay, I mean like, can fight off being mugged, but if Surtur decides to shoot his fire sword at you, you're probably not gonna be okay. That being said, underneath all of the Asgardian muscle and godlike power, Thor is still a master in hand-to-hand combat. He trained his whole life to be a warrior. He was taught a number of martial arts styles both from Earth and Asgard from the time he was a kid. Therefore, he does have a mastery over his body even without superhuman strength, speed, or stamina. He is also a master in a number of weapons that extends far beyond hammers. He likes wrenches and screwdrivers too. Oh, and throw swords, knives, axes, throw it all in as well. One of Thor's coolest unknown powers is also one of his most dangerous. Thor is not the only one with this unique power. Wolverine has it. He calls it the Berserker Rage. This power is essentially the entire reason that the Incredible Hulk exists. For Thor, this specific power is known as Warrior's Madness. Essentially, Warrior's Madness is a state of being where every power Thor possesses is increased tenfold. That means every power we have talked about to this point, the hand-to-hand combat, the stamina, speed, strength, and yes, the Alltongue, are increased beyond the insane levels of power they were already at. The caveat about Warrior's Madness, as you may have guessed given the name, is that it causes Thor to lose his mind for all intents and purposes. Thor may experience near unlimited power, but there's nothing to stop him from hurting the ones he loves around him. That's why this specific power has been made illegal by the law of Odin. And don't worry, that law will totally never be broken, probably. You see, Cap, that's his secret. He's always, seeing ghosts. He's a mean green fighting machine, and there's a lot more to this Marvel hero than just smashing stuff. Though admittedly, that is a huge part of his MO. The Incredible Hulk is already known as one of the strongest heroes in the Marvel Universe. But there are several powers and abilities that you may be unaware that this green monster possesses. Let's put the brain and the brawn together and take a look right now. This one is a power I too once had in my life from approximately the ages of 4 to 11-ish. That power is the ability to eat anything and everything and somehow still go for a run right after. Mind-boggling. Today I eat a cupcake and that's the end of my night. The most interesting part of this mildly hilarious power is that the Hulk doesn't actually need to eat anything. Much like Superman, whose energy comes from solar radiation instead of food, the Hulk is constantly fueled by his gamma-irradiated cells. Therefore, he doesn't actually need to eat, but will, either for pleasure or the occasional gag of seeing the enormous Hulk eating a chicken leg. The Hulk is so durable, however, and it clearly stretches to his stomach, as he can literally eat not only the meal, but the plates, table, and refrigerator without any issues if he truly wanted. There's a lot of things that would wound or even end the life of a normal person that the Incredible Hulk is simply immune to. These include but are not limited to falling from helicopters, confinement by shirts, and interestingly, viral diseases. I mean, are you surprised? Just picture it. Tony says, "Guys, where is Bruce? Loki's about to destroy New York again." Cap then says, "Wait, he's texting me now. Oh, he says he's not feeling too well and needs a sick day." The Hulk is truly immune to most, if not all, diseases. One of the most impressive showings of this feat was when the Hulk resisted the spores called spikes in Planet Hulk. These spikes use these spores to infect people, and then take away their free will. The Hulk's metabolism is so supercharged that his body fought the infection faster than the infection could spread. Do you really think Thor called dibs on all thunder and thunder-adjacent powers? While truthfully, he does have most of those, the Hulk has an insane power you may have even seen before, but didn't know it had a name. This crazy power is called the Thunderclap. Hulk is so strong that clapping his hands together creates such a sonic shockwave that it can knock enemies completely off their feet. The Hulk actually used this power in 2008's The Incredible Hulk. You know, back when he looked way more like Edward Norton. When a run of flame was headed straight for the crashed helicopter that Betty was in, the Hulk used the thunderclap to create such a strong gust of wind that the flames were extinguished. A clap that powerful also probably completely deafened his girlfriend, which is probably why we haven't seen her since.
Other guy says...
No, I know what this looks like, but I promise, that's Bruce Banner, not Princess Fiona. Bruce is known for transforming into an uncontrollable rage monster when he loses his temper. However, there are some iterations of the Hulk whose transformation shares a weird amount in common with a werewolf. Only instead of a full moon, it's simply the night sky.
Hulk, always Hulk.
In The Incredible Hulk issue 368, the Hulk begins to emerge every night as soon as the sun goes down. This version of the Hulk was more aware, but still capable of flattening tanks. It was theorized that the Hulk had actually gained control over Banner, but was ashamed for the world to see him. Therefore, he could control when the transformation from Bruce to Hulk happened, but he chose to wait until the cover of Nightfall. Remember when you were a kid and your older sister would threaten to punch you into the next dimension? No, was that just me? Anyway, that was all talk. However, if the Incredible Hulk was making that threat, I would be slightly more afraid of a guy who can back it up. Kind of like how Ultron smashed his way through that glass dimensional wall to get to the Watcher's house, Hulk has shown the same strength that literally allows him to punch through dimensions. This seems like it might be a pretty useful power to unleash in the MCU, now that Kang is coming, and Wanda will likely try to trap everyone in a New Jersey suburb again.
Next time, knock. What do you want?
Every muscle in Hulk's body is superior to just about anyone. This, of course, includes his calves, which are genuinely larger than entire bovine creatures. The perfection of performance that the Hulk's body grants him gives him peak performance in certain areas. Running and jumping are definitely two of these. Now, of course, we know the Hulk can run, and jump, and smash. However, what you may not know is that the Hulk can leap from continent to continent over entire oceans. Take that, Amelia Earhart. He also can reach superhuman levels of speed. He probably couldn't catch the Flash or Quicksilver, but some other heroes like Cap and Black Panther likely lose every time. This makes sense considering his legs are basically powered by jet engines. The Incredible Hulk truly has earned that name. For years, he has been secretly harboring powers that other characters think make them special. He was probably just trying to be polite. The Hulk has fought Namor the Submariner on numerous occasions. Whether it be during Namor's time with the Illuminati, or even more interestingly, way back in 1963 when Hulk revealed a slightly helpful power on Namor's home turf. Hulk can literally breathe underwater. Not only is his lung capacity so large to hold his breath, but he supposedly has an extra gland that produces oxygen. That plus the strength to survive the intense pressure of the deep basically makes the Hulk worthy of challenging for the throne of Atlantis. The Hulk is more than just a giant wrecking ball. He is actually extremely complex and was given several abilities throughout his accident, as well as gained some others along the way. When Bruce finally defeated his father, he worried that the Maniac may come back from beyond the grave to attempt to settle the score. As a preemptive measure, Bruce gave the Hulk the ability to see ghosts. How? Science, or whatever. Regardless, the Hulk has since had an air of mysticism surrounding him, as he can see members of the undead and even converse with some. He also has the ability to see sorcerers like Doctor Strange in their astral form. This has yet to be teased in the MCU, but just imagine Bruce having another conversation with his late friend Tony. In the admittedly paraphrased words of one Nicholas Joseph Fury, "Hulk, please, you've been to space." The Incredible Hulk has the ability to survive in conditions that would destroy other living creatures. This includes possibly the most dangerous environment of them all, the void of space. His healing and strength protects him from the vacuum-like pressure, and as seen with his underwater capabilities, his lung capacity can store plenty of air to keep him alive. In fact, because the Hulk gets stronger as long as he gets angrier, let's just say being in space really ticks him off. This next unknown power reveals an extremely interesting inner working of the Hulk's mind.
Shut the front door.
Obviously, Bruce suffers from a bit of a personality disorder to say the least. However, while we know about Bruce and the Big Green Guy, there is said to actually be other facets of Bruce's personality that lay deep below the surface. Because of this, the head of the Hulk contains a mind so complex that he is even able to resist mind control. Even the strongest telepaths like Professor X can't crack the thick-headed skull of the Incredible Hulk, because they simply don't know which mind is the one they need to control. This next one is less of a power and more of a side effect that happens to have insane consequences.
Just wasn't expecting a code green.
After becoming completely drunk with gamma radiation, Bruce transformed into the hulking green monster, which he tried to tame for years. Little did he know that in this same moment he gained the power to give others the same or similar fates. Bruce Banner's blood is also irradiated with gamma radiation, which could be very dangerous. Heck, it made Stan Lee drop his soda. This dangerous blood has been used to unintentionally create other Hulks. The most famous example is Jennifer Walters, Bruce's cousin, better known as She-Hulk. When Jennifer was shot by a mob boss, Bruce transfused his Hulk blood into her to save her life. Because their DNA closely matched, Jennifer became the iconic heroine, capable of smashing stuff with the best. Fun trivia question. What color was the Hulk when he first appeared back in 1962?
Green.
No, not green, you're wrong. He was gray. Eventually, Bruce dosed himself with more and more gamma radiation to mutate himself even further, turning himself into the green monster we know and love. The truth is that gray characters were not the most well-printed visual aspects and they just needed to change it up. However, Grey Hulk would eventually return as a separate personality of Bruce called Joe Fixit. He wore a suit. It was crazy. The Hulk has also been known to change color when his power level changes, like when he became the World Breaker Hulk. We have talked a lot about Hulk's lung capacity, so of course this guy has super breath. Granted, he doesn't have quite the mastery over it that someone like Superman has, seeing as he has yet to freeze anyone, but he has been able to knock down entire forests and create tornado-level winds with a powerful exhale. In an issue of The Incredible Hulk, Hulk and She-Hulk went up against a villain called the Arsenal. This villain released a poisonous gas that could have ended the life of Jennifer Walters, had Bruce not been there to display his super breath and blow the gas away. Just listen to that last sentence again. Comics are wacky, man. Wolverine, Sabretooth, Deadpool, what do they all have in common? No, besides their recent move to the House of Mouse.
Dobbs, get me out of here, please!
They have some of the greatest regeneration powers in the Marvel Universe. Wolverine can heal from an atomic bomb, and Deadpool can regrow his entire lower half.
Oh no, they're right here!
The Incredible Hulk, though granted through radiation and not mutation, definitely shares some of these abilities. He can completely regrow tissue in seconds, allowing severe wounds to heal very quickly. In the comics, this is definitely not a well-known fact, and in the MCU, it may not even be totally true. The Hulk still has a scar from his fight with Abomination in The Incredible Hulk, and in What If, the Hulk straight up exploded. Granted, that's not the easiest thing to heal from, but hey, Deadpool did it. Have you ever heard of secondhand smoke? How about secondhand gamma radiation poisoning? Hulk is essentially a walking ball of gamma radiation. And I know that worked out for Bruce, but I promise that exposure to that stuff rarely goes that well. This power has been used against him by characters who can absorb energy, and he has even been turned back into Bruce at times because of this. However, against other villains, all he would really have to do is sit in a room with them, and they should definitely immediately head to a doctor afterwards. They don't call him Incredible for nothing. You might think of him as a show-off, but the Hulk definitely has several tricks up his sleeve that he chooses to keep more hidden. Which of Hulk's surprising powers do you think is the most useful?